But anyways, let us move on to... Oh, what are you doing? What's going on? Okay, let's go on to Arith's story. Division and Unity by Arith Winterfell. "We must not let the flame of human freedom die," Tomlin declared. "The vile cybernetic unity has been making overtures to our leaders, such as Administrator Lin. They threaten our very autonomy of being, and all the personal freedoms our ancestors fought and died for." Tomlin's words were met with loud cheers of approval from the crowd. Tomlin continued, "We cannot allow our leaders to be seduced by the false promises of the cybernetic unity. We must stand united, drive out these representatives, and repel any future so-called offers from the cybernetic unity. Tonight, we set our sights on Representative Arlen." The soft blue glow from Arlen's artificial eyes lessened as Administrator Lin turned on the lights to the meeting lounge. He sat down in a relaxed manner and gestured for her to join him in the nearby chair. Lin joined him there, and he continued with their conversation. "You see, the unity is built on the ideals of mutual understanding. We carry the fire of that understanding and hold it dearly. Our forebears witnessed and came out of the religious and political divisions that racked Earth in its final century before the flight of humanity into the larger solar system and eventually into the stars. We not only want to share experiences through the unity, we want to understand each other deeply and sincerely through that oneness." "Goodness," Administrator Lin mused, "you make it almost sound like a religious experience." "I suppose you could frame it that way," sighed Arlen. "But our people have found religion can both unite, but also deeply divide people. Just like the way nationalistic pride has both united and divided mankind for centuries. Our hope is that the experience of the unity can not only fulfill the natural longing humanity has for communion with each other, but that it will help us, through that understanding, to heal the divisions that threaten to separate us and turn us against each other." Throughout those moths and monsters, cheer for the story if you loved it. Reincarnator redeemed something. I don't know what's going on there. I've not seen that notification before. But thank you, whatever that was.
Hi, Kitty. Hi.
Alrighty, this story was great too. And I also have the same question as I had for Little Lady Eva's. This story is also a sequel. So, for those of you who have not read the prequel, how did this story read to you? Was anything confusing? What did you think that Representative Arlen was? Like what species or kind of creature did you think he was? Which side did you believe? If you are new to this universe, did you believe Tomlin, that, oh my gosh, he's totally manipulating her? Or did you believe Arlen in the second half thought, no, actually, we just want peace on Earth and goodwill to men? Thank you for the hype train. Thank you for the cheers, Deathshead and Ghoulish Misfit. Greatly appreciate that. It made hearts on the screen. Okay, interesting. I don't know why it didn't show up properly for me. But anyways, Kitty, where'd you go? Oh, there you are.
You want out again? Come here. Come here, you little weirdo. Come here, you little weirdo. Baby. A nice big area for you to plop down.
So let's see. So I really liked this story. I really liked the sequel from last time, just as I did with Little Lady Eva's. And, you know, knowing what was going on, it was fun. Being able to come back to a story from this universe and know a little bit more about what the deal was really fun.
Okay, fine.
And they must pay the camera tax. Yeah, totally. It's the toll bridge of getting out of the room. So I think I will start with, because I was just talking about it with Little Lady Eva's story, I think I will start with one of my critiques, which is that, so I really love the first part, and I really love the second part. I think they both bring up some really great and interesting points and stories and stuff like that. The problem is, and before I say that, I will say that something that I think really works within the standalone of these things together is that Arlen is basically talking about exactly this, that he's like, that kind of all this stuff is basically what's going on up here, that like everybody's arguing and not communing with each other, not understanding each other, and banding against each other. And so Arlen is basically going, yeah, what's happening up there, yeah, we were trying to avoid that. And so I really like that, and I think that works within the standalone. But I think that unfortunately these things end up not quite working as a standalone, because this never comes to fruition. That we are introduced, hey, there's a rebellion, we're setting our sights on Arlen tonight. And so basically the whole story I'm expecting, okay, when are they gonna come in? When's the mob gonna show up at the door? And they don't. We just have a nice conversation. And so I feel like this would really work. Like, you don't actually need to do much to connect them, but I think just a small connection would work. Like something like maybe, Arlen looks at the door and someone's coming in the door and like his eyes widen or something like that. His artificial eyes widen. Or if it is a mob, then maybe they hear something outside. Like that actually could be the ending. Like the ending could be they heard shouts outside, or they heard a rock hit the window or something like that. Or they could go up to the window and they could see the mob outside. Anything that connects, like, hey, yes, they made their move on Representative Arlen. They are here. I think would be very helpful. But as is, I don't feel like I get the full story, because, and even though, like, it's hard to describe, but as is, I don't feel like I get the full story, because I'm introduced, all right, like, I'm ready for the brawl, I'm ready for them to come attack, and so then to set something up and have that not happen doesn't really work for me personally. You could have it work better to just have them be protesting. Like they could be protesting outside of, a shop or something. And then we would see this, and then that mirroring itself would be the completion of the two parts. Or if you had it, as I said, at the end they come in, that would feel like, okay, like something was introduced and that thing came to fruition. Even if I didn't see the full extent of what happened, it would still feel like I got that payoff from the beginning. I got that connection. But without that, I'm kind of going, well, it didn't really need to be introduced. If nothing was going to come of that, then it didn't need to be introduced. And as I said, it's cool that it's symbolic, that it symbolically fits together. But it's not really enough to justify its presence, if that makes sense. That there needs to be a plot reason for it to be there, to justify, using the words on it. And so even a small connection would justify it. But without it, I'm kind of going, why are the two things here? That being said, I do really like the beginning. I do think that it's really engaging. I immediately feel very drawn into the story. And I like that a lot. Small thing. It is a little odd to say, the Unity has been making overtures to our leaders, such as Administrator Lynn. They threaten our very autonomy. So I feel like just going straight to the vile cybernetic Unity is making overtures to Administrator Lynn. And then you could keep we cannot allow our leaders to be seduced at the end here. But just going straight to Administrator Lynn would make us go, okay, let's remember that name. And so then when she comes up here, we remember who she was. But yeah, I do think it's really interesting that they're like, you know, our ancestors fought and died for personal freedom. And then Arlen is kind of like, I don't know about that. I don't know if your ancestors fought and died for personal freedom. Maybe they fought and died for personal arguments. So that's fun. Another little thing. Representative here feels oddly respectful, especially after it was in quotes here. I feel like it could work if it was in quotes again, but I feel like saying either, saying it with a snide remark, like Representative Arlen, you know, but as is, it kind of feels like, we set our sights on the Honorable Arlen, and it's like, well, we don't think he's honorable, though. So I think saying something like, tonight we set our sights on that cur Arlen, or, you know, that manipulative snake Arlen, something like that, I think would work better. But I do really like that, and it's actually part of why I like it, that I'm critiquing it, that I'm like, oh, okay, I'm ready for this, I'm intrigued by this, you know, kind of thing. But continuing on. So I like this little setting detail, this little physical description, but I have something to critique about it as well. So last time on this series, we learned, so in the last story that I read from this universe, I was extremely suspicious of Arlen, and I walked away from the story going, don't trust him, don't follow him. I was with the rebellious leaders. And then Arith explained, oh, the cybernetic unity are human. Like, this isn't an alien race, this isn't AI. They are humans, and they have made this decision to share their minds for all the reasons that Arlen says here. And once I learned that, I was like, oh, now I believe him. And so I feel like for any story that you write in this universe, that is extremely important to make clear. Because as is, the only physical description we have of Arlen is his artificial eyes. And with that, you easily get the impression that he is completely artificial. You hear the word cybernetic unity, artificial eyes. You can easily connect the dots and go, okay, so this is just a robot. This is not a human being. And it can be difficult because I think in the other story you did try to do that. But in that story, I got the impression that, oh yeah, they picked a human. They made a robot. They made a robot to look human, to be more convincing, you know. Oh yeah, we made this robot for your viewing pleasure, so that you will be more ingratiated to us, and you will want to join us because we look like you. And so that is a fear that you do have to be careful of. And I should have written down like an example, but I think somehow, you know, conveying that Arlen is human, period. And the only thing artificial about him is his eyes, I think would be really helpful. Follower goal met, 90 out of 90. That's awesome. Thank you so much to any new followers who have joined. I really appreciate that. But yeah, so I wish I had a better example of how to do that, but I think that is extremely important to this universe because it completely changes how he reads, or at least it did. At least it did for me. Anyways, I like the atmosphere, and I think that, oh yeah, that was actually something I was going to say up here, that something you could say is like, you could say, you know, they've been making overtures to our leader, to Administrator Lynn. Or you could say something like, the vile cybernetic unity has Administrator Lynn in their clutches. And so then that would make it even more fun when we get to the end, and it's just like some nice hand-holding. You know, it's a nice chat. And so she's in his clutches, perhaps, but not in the way they mean it. So that could be fun. But I really like the setting, the posture. I think it really helps. Granted, I know what's going on, and so I'm gonna have a tougher time pointing out how people who don't know what's going on might think. That's part of why I asked the chat. But I do think that the setting helps it to seem more genuine, perhaps. I really like Arlen's like, you know, goals and views. I think it's really interesting that it's like, hey, like, people argued about religion and political stuff, and you know what? That wasn't great. That didn't create for the greatest atmosphere. And we were like, you know what? I think we want to understand each other. I think we want to, you know, be more empathetic to other people and understand people's points of view better. And so we decided to share our minds with each other so that we would be more united. And I'm like, you know what? I'm starting to get it. I especially like how you do it down here, because like these statements here is saying like there are good things to religion and bad things to religion. There are good things to politics and bad things to politics. And that absolutely seems like the kind of person who has been part of the unity, like what somebody who has been part of the unity would say, because it's like, yes, I have been part of the unity. I understand other people's points of view. And because of that, I can say things like this instead of just being like, oh yeah, religion sucks. We wanted to get away from that completely. It's like, well, you know, there's good things about it and there's issues with it. And even him saying like, you could frame it that way. And we'll come back to her line in a bit, but I feel like it's a weird way to frame it. And so the fact that his response is like, well, you could frame it that way, again, is very much like, yeah, like, I understand other people have different points of view, and it's all right if you'd like to frame it that way. I don't agree, though. I think that's really cool. So that's a great way of writing his character, that you really are writing him as if he has done what he says he's done. Which I think is very cool. And like I said, I like that pretty much everything he's addressing what happened up above. That people are like, all right, Arlen sucks, we gotta get rid of him. And he's like, you know, I've learned that that's usually not the case. Usually there's more nuance to these situations, and maybe don't, though. So coming back to this here, I feel like her response, well, interesting, and I like that his monologue is broken up by her like asking something, but I feel like it's an odd response, because he just said, our forebears witnessed and came out of the religious and political divisions that racked the earth, and continuing on. And so, like, after hearing him say, hey, we witnessed all the issues that religion can cause, and we weren't really a fan of that, and so we were trying to address that. And then she immediately was like, this sounds religious. And I'm sitting there going, it sounds like the opposite. Like, first of all, what he just described doesn't sound like a religious experience to me. And second of all, he explicitly said, we're trying to address the problems with religion. And so saying, like, this seems like a religious experience seems at the very least to miss the point. Let's see how I phrased it here. Yeah, so, like, religious differences are things people argued over, so the point of the unity was for everyone to see each other's points of views and to stop such arguments. So framing it as a religion defeats the purpose. Like, it is very different than what a religion is, and tries to go back here and address some of the problems with religion. I think the only thing that he says that sounds like a religious experience is this. And so I think if you put that we carry the fire for that understanding and hold it dearly at the very end, and so she's responding to that last thing he said, I think that would work. But the fact that that's really far up comparatively, and he said, you know, we were trying to address the problems with religion afterwards, means that it doesn't really make sense as a response. And like sounds a little bit like a religious experience, but it sounds like that's not where my mind would go to super easily. Like, oh, there's the timer. So like we share our experiences, we want to understand each other deeply and sincerely through that oneness. Like, yeah, religion can be something that unites people and can be something that, like, oh, I want to understand you and be like one body with you, like the body of Christ kind of thing. But that's not where my mind goes to first. My mind just goes to relationships and then goes to, like, yeah, people, as he says down below, like, we have a longing for communion. We want to be in relationship with each other. And so it takes me a while before I arrive at sounds like a religious experience. But like I said, this one I can get there quite easily. I can go from, yeah, we carry the fire and hold it dearly. Like, this is kind of describing something that isn't literal and something that is deep inside your spirit, kind of thing. And that seems a lot more religious. And so, like I said, if it was at the end and that's what she was responding to, I think that would work. But as is, it feels like she's kind of missing the point. And maybe that is the point, is that it's like, hey, we saw the problems of religion and, we decided to maybe address that. Wow, this sounds religious. You can frame it that way if you want to. Maybe that's the point. But it seems a little bit odd. But I'll look at the comments real quick. Thank you for the cheer, Redrev. That is very much appreciated. And thank you for the cheer, Mako Kim. And Marks. I don't think I saw Marks's before. Little Lady Eva says, I'm new to the universe and I believe that Arlen was a cyborg. What do you mean by cyborg? Do you mean, the artificial eyes but the rest of him is human? Did you mean like, no, he's pretty much not human? What were your thoughts? Peace on earth, goodwill towards men. Christmas already? Interesting. This says maybe it's like British rules and you have to use honorific titles even for your sworn enemies. That's kind of awesome. Momentary laughter for your viewing pleasure. Yeah. Arith says, that part about the understanding through oneness was a nod to mysticism where people seek to be one with God is something being compared to the oneness of the unity. I see. Yeah. I mean, I do still stand by what I was saying, that there is something a bit religious about this, and I can see where you're going. It just doesn't quite connect super well to me, especially after he was like, saying, hey, there are problems with religion we were trying to address. I'm trying to think of if there's like maybe a metaphor to use. Yeah, I'm not sure. That is one encore. Yay! Little lady here says, I'm a human with robot parts. Gotcha. So, next question. Which person did you believe? Did you believe Tomlin that he has her in his clutches? Or did you believe Arlen that, he just wants peace on earth and goodwill to men? Rejo says, I love that story, but I gotta admit the role of Administrator Lynn puzzles me. I don't know how she positions herself relative to the cybernetic unity, and that left me with more questions than answers, especially since she seems so important. If that was intentional, that's really well done. Interesting. I'd be curious to hear more. What about that confused you? The Lady Ava says, I believe Tomlin. Arlen seems too calm to believe. So that is what I thought when I read the first story. So I do think that gives some credence to my critique of, I do think it's really important to show he is human. Like, all the cybernetic unity are, they genuinely want this, they're not trying to take over humanity or anything like that. He wants it to be Christmas every day. Pretty much. They want to be like like the ghost of Christmas present, like happy and jolly all the time. Except without what's underneath. But anyways, thank you so much for submitting, Arith. This was great. Oh yeah, and then I also like the title too, that it's like division and unity. I think that's cool. Oh, interesting. Arith says, interesting outside of story detail for fun. Arlen is currently separated from the unity. Wait, so do you mean that, like, when he came to this planet, he had to, like, okay, I'll see you in a bit, friends. Like, I need to be separated while I go do this, but I'll be back. Or is it like he's a deserter from the Unity? And if he is, why is he trying to recruit her? It's that the distance between the stars is too much for the information to travel. Gotcha. Interesting. Oh yeah, I guess one last thing I wanted to say is that I do feel like it could be helpful for this second part to make it more of a back and forth and potentially make it more personal, because this is very similar to what he was talking about last time. And so I think if maybe like Lynn is like really contemplating joining and she's like, okay, like I'm thinking of joining, can you tell me more about what my experience will be? And he's like, well, your experience is going to be like this. And then she could be like, oh, that sounds like a religious experience, or that sounds like X, Y, and Z. And then he could be like, well, let me answer that. You know, I think that going more back and forth between them, I think could be a little bit more engaging. I like it as is, but I do think that, you know, adding more than, especially because, like I said, and there's also the element of adding the mob at the end, or adding the attempt at the end, I think could help with making it that much more engaging, if that makes sense. Gotcha. He's still part of the Unity, but he's out of range, basically. He has no cell service. He has no service to get to the Unity. Alrighty. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for submitting, Arith.